And welcome to today's webinar, Pivoting to E-Commerce-Only Marketing During COVID-19. My name is Kristen Hammerstadt. I'm Head of Marketing here at Smarter HQ, and I will be your moderator for today. And I have with me my colleague, Kara Holthouse, VP of Client Services here at Smarter HQ, where she will cover ways to get the most out of your e-commerce-only marketing strategy during this time. So whether you've already started the process or don't even know where to start, you're in the right place. And with that, I'll hand things over to Kara to kick things off.
Thanks so much, Kristen, and welcome everyone who's joining us here today. I know we're all adapting to this changing time, so appreciating you coming on here and we can talk about what we're seeing with our customers and what's working and what might help you with your challenges as we go through this time in our world. So I'm Kara Holthouse. I head up Client Services and Client Success here at Smarter HQ. I have been with Smarter HQ for a little over 7 years, and prior to that, I was on the e-commerce and digital marketing side for a retailer here in Indianapolis. And I've talked to a lot of our customers. We've got a lot of great resources. You can see them here on the side of the screen. We'll also be sharing this out after the webinar as well for easy reference. There's a lot of great tips here for you as you navigate this time. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Smarter HQ, we are a personalization platform built on a CDP infrastructure. So we work with customers like Macy's, Sam's Club, Omni Hotels, Magnolia Market, just to name a few, to unify all of their behavioral customer data so they can segment audiences for automated and triggered personalized experiences through different messaging platforms and through their website. We have 25 plus integrations with all of the major ESPs and marketing clouds, as well as with some push providers and ad providers like Facebook and Google. All right, so let's get into it and talk through COVID-19's impact and some of the e-commerce trends that we're seeing, particularly within our client base. And with brands and brick and mortar closing their stores right now, you know, you'd think we'd be seeing a larger uptick in e-commerce revenue, but we're actually not seeing that. Part of this is due to the job loss that we're hearing across the country and across the world, and the lack of spending right now. On the consumer side, I know just in my own personal conversations, you have varying views. Some are, you know, turning to retail for more of the therapy side and feeling good. Some are being much more conservative just for their personal situation. But we're not really seeing as big of a shift of in-store customers to online as you might think. And so with the charts that we've shown here, we've got some tactics that we can talk about how we can help engage and convert previous in-store shoppers that we'll cover today. But we are seeing some retail categories showing a surge in online sales over the past couple of weeks as a result of the COVID-19 virus, many of which have shifted to a stronger focus in e-com strategies to meet consumer demand. So we've got a couple of different categories to show here. The highlighted date that we have here is March 13th, which, you know, from everything that we were seeing, that's really where the shift across the whole entire country came of, you know, the majority of the stores closing, people staying inside. So we kind of use that as our date to guide, you know, a shift in behavior. And you can kind of see that across department stores, some luxury fashion here, loungewear and home goods, you know, which really makes a lot of sense right now, kind of spiking after that date. From an e-commerce perspective, beauty as well, and then especially we do have some charitable customers that we are seeing some spikes in e-commerce sales and support for their particular charitable work at this time as well. From a marketing perspective, we are seeing many brands revert back to old marketing tactics. I think this is really out of the fear of the unknown. This is a new world for many of us. You know, majority of us have not lived through something like this, if at all. So we're all navigating this together, and it changes day by day, which is why I think we're seeing a lot of this. We're seeing still a lot of retailers out there blasting their whole entire list really focusing on the mass sends right now, and a lot of retailers are running big sales equivalent to Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and retail needs immediate revenue and change. We understand that, but we might then start to see a higher unsubscribe rate and lose that long-term relationship you've been working so hard for with your customers. So now it's more important than ever to send the right message, not the wrong or generic one, which is what I think we'll cover, more about as we talk through some of the tactics and things you can be doing throughout this webinar with minimal effort. Because I think a lot of teams understand that we're all working with unique work from home situations right now.
Great, thanks Kara for sharing those insights. So before we dive into the rest of the content that Kara has to share with us today, we did want to pause to see how you're all doing and being impacted and what ways you're shifting your strategy during this time. With the live poll, there's just 4 simple questions that we will ask of you, and we will share the results of the poll after each question is answered. This will help just give us, or Kara, more context as she's sharing through the rest of this segment to understand where you guys are at and how you're being impacted at this time. We do ask that only B2C or retail brands answer the poll, just given the nature of the questions. So I'm going to launch the first question. How have you prioritized personalized messages over the last 2 weeks? Just giving everyone a couple more seconds. All right, I think we're locked in. I'm going to close the poll. Results are in. Looks like half of you are sending more personalized messages and the other half are staying the same.
Yeah, we're seeing this within the customer base as well, just with Smarter HQ customers that I've been talking with over the last couple of weeks. And we'll talk about how to make it easier to do more with personalization. But it's great to see that there's very few that are doing less, which is great.
Okay, next question. Have you adjusted your messaging strategy based on unique and changing behaviors during the pandemic? So think about a lot of people may not be engaging right now just because they're being significantly impacted with their jobs. Other people may be at home and are distracted and are disengaging right after they've been on the site because they've got to take care of their needs. Think of things like that, just a very different shopping behaviors during this time. Okay, I'm going to close the poll. And it looks like 100% of you have adjusted your messaging strategy, and that's good. It's good to see that. Okay, we're going to go to the third question. Are you leveraging previous in-store shopping data to personalize messaging to shoppers to encourage online shopping? Are you using that in-store data now that stores are closed to help get them back on the site? Give you just a couple seconds here. Okay, looks like maybe we're locked in here. So I'm going to close the poll and share the results. And it looks like a good amount of you are using that in-store shopping data. It's great to see.
Yep, and we'll talk through, for those that have access to that or it's on your roadmap for the near future, we'll talk through ways that you can leverage that now and when stores can reopen.
And we have one last question to ask. What do you anticipate to be your biggest challenge going forward? Inventory management, new customer acquisition, in-store sales loss, online customer retention, and then staffing and reopening stores. Looks like answers are still coming through. Okay, I'm going to close the poll. No surprise here, in-store sales loss is the biggest challenge going forward, followed closely by what I know Kara had anticipated, which was inventory management. And then actually just recently having talked to Brendan Witcher at Forrester, he also foresees staffing and reopening stores to be a challenge, especially given that he anticipates that people will want to go into the stores and start shopping as soon as they're able to, and they're going to want to get out and they're going to want to start engaging with people. So that also is not much of a surprise.
And I'm sure, Kristen, if we would have had an all of the above, that would have been a popular choice as well. There's, everyone that we're talking to is facing all kinds of different challenges. Some, in the case of, certain areas of their business or their entire business is booming. And so they've actually had to dial down the marketing efforts to keep up with the demand, and others, trying to make up for lost demand in other categories, with those categories that might be hot right now, like loungewear, home goods, consumables, things like that. So great, thanks for participating in all of that. And we'll go ahead and move on to our next section, which is going to be talking through some things to keep in mind as you pivot your marketing strategy. And it seems like you're probably having to pivot just about every single day as things are changing, as you're getting inventory in stock, out of stock, figuring out how to get inventory perhaps out of those stores that are in the malls that are closed, and still being able to leverage that before we're completely out of season. So let's go into the first thing to keep in mind. And it sounds like from the poll, you guys are all thinking through this, that sensitivity is absolutely paramount right now. Being able to change copy and how you're messaging to your consumers in this time, and have that empathy and sympathy coming through your emails is going to be key to continuing those relationships throughout this crisis, as many are struggling due to the loss of income and the gravity of the situation as a whole. So it's great that you all are adjusting this. And I think one thing to really keep in mind is you don't necessarily have to pause everything, but it's critical to make adjustments, and many of you have, and finding other ways to engage with the consumers and relate and continue that relationship based off of the behavior they're having back with you and reacting from that. Distraction is definitely at an all-time high. I think those of you on the phone in particular too, with small children at home or children of any kind trying to do the homeschooling, as well as your job, can be very difficult and very distracting. And we already knew this was a challenge before COVID-19. We had a survey that we put out earlier that 95% of people said they were distracted and doing other things while shopping. And so now that's just been elevated as we're in the situation that we're in. So that's why it's really important to have best-in-class abandonment campaigns, making sure that you've got those varying data sets of where people might be engaging in the moment with your brand, all tied together to understand the complete picture of their behavior. So if you've got an app as well as desktop, as well as even a call center, especially if you're in that travel and hospitality space, to be able to tie all of those pieces together to truly understand how each customer needs to be communicated with, will go a long way. Another adjustment that we're recommending for our customers too is to make sure that your messages are in as real time as much as you can, and prioritizing the most recent channel too that they've engaged with. We've got some customers that outside of that, busy season period will, maybe for more up funnel campaigns, higher level campaigns, will maybe wait a little bit longer, like say a day or so before following up based on that behavior if no purchase is made. Right now, we're recommending to shorten those windows to be within just a couple of hours if you can. Identification is also key, and the charts we were showing earlier was really all based off of online purchase behavior, but we're also seeing, depending on what industry you're in, spikes in the actual sessions and people coming to the site, especially if they were a frequent in-store shopper. Now that they're coming online, it is going to be critical for recovering lost revenue throughout this period to be able to identify as many people as possible. So that means people without logging in, without an account in general, or maybe just clicking through an email and not even entering their email address anywhere else on the site. It's important to have solutions in place that can help you identify those people so you can communicate to them and personalize their experience with you appropriately throughout the email channel in particular. And will also help you down the road in terms of understanding how their behavior is changing as this crisis and pandemic changes as well. I think one really big thing to keep in mind is to treat this data differently, and we're seeing a lot of that. A lot of our customers are treating it like a busy season, which is great. We're seeing a lot of discounting similar to Cyber Week to encourage that sale. But keep in mind too, what you're seeing now won't be the longer term norm. I think we are going to see just some behaviors change over time. But this is a moment in time and a period where when stores can reopen, we're going to see behavior change again. So remember that we are in a different time period right now, but it's not going to be how we operate forever down the road. So it's important to adapt, but be in a situation too where we can adapt again as things change and as everyone can get back out into the world. I think one other thing to think about too with this data, if you are in an area where your business is actually booming from this and have a greater need for your products, you might want to consider taking a look at a lot of your evergreen campaigns, and if there are some evergreen promotions in those that aren't one-time single-use codes and a part of that promotional calendar, you may be okay with removing those for a short time period because the demand is so much higher and people are going to purchase anyway without that promotion. So something to think about there too, specific to your business. All right, and we talked about this a little bit in the beginning, but you're also going to want to look at pulling back on your mass blast sends. We've heard this a lot from our customer base where they're pulling back on the mass send, personalizing those sends where they can, but leveraging a lot of ad hoc trigger based off of behavior type of campaigns because you are reacting to those who are still engaging and still showing interest in your brand and in the products that you have to offer. Target those deep discounts and sales like you can, especially if I'm browsing products that are a part of those sales. You know, make sure that communication is being tailored to me and not necessarily sent out to your entire list, because we do want to preserve that customer acquisition that you've built up so long, and not have you lose that from a lot of unsubscribes and people being just overwhelmed by the situation that they might be in. Okay, and one of the biggest things too is to continue to optimize and to stay flexible. A lot of the specific ideas that we'll talk about here next are all meant to be more quick win style, not brand new huge campaigns or series, and you can leverage things that you're already doing because we're seeing it change as every day goes on, especially on the inventory front with excess in certain areas, with struggles and shortages in other areas. It's going to be extremely critical, especially for your team, for this time to be able to execute, to stay as flexible as possible and to reuse as much of the templates that we can build up here as possible, and let that dynamic content work for you versus needing to go back to your creative team for every single campaign that we're talking about here. Some other big ways to optimize without even needing to touch the actual messaging within a lot of your recurring campaigns is to reduce those frequency caps and suppressions. That's very similar to what we do in particular with the holiday time period. Allow for that real-time follow-up, so maybe shorten your business rules, your windows that you're looking at for that behavior and following up faster, like we talked about earlier. And then personalization modules can add a huge increase in click-through rate and engagement and driving people back to your site. I'll talk through a specific example as we go through some of those here in the next part of this discussion, but being able to swap different pieces of content within your larger marketing sense to get a bigger bang for your buck can be a great way to go about this as well with minimal effort. Okay, so let's get into some key campaigns to focus on right now. And I loved in the poll to see that many of you were already leveraging in-store data today, or thinking about other ways that you could be leveraging that, as you know, e-commerce is the primary mode for driving those sales right now. And so if you have the data sets combined with online, make sure you're using that. Communicate to those in-store only shoppers differently and encourage that initial purchase online. That might be in the form of an additional promotion and making that offer for the first online purchase, but then also helping to guide them through the benefits of online. I know it may seem simple, but just slightly tailoring that message to that group of consumers can go a really long way. You see a great example here from Bloomingdale's. They're doing this normally throughout the entire year, but even more so now that's becoming more and more important. Another great use of that in-store data is to be able to better cross-sell and recommend items that are similar to either an in-store purchase that they had already made. This is also a great example and tactics even just for online post-purchase series as well. And to keep that engagement and conversation going, especially on those hot categories. So think about too, purchases in the categories that may be booming within your business right now, and how a cross-sell or upsell approach might be able to work in that post-purchase series to encourage an additional purchase down the road. And then a great post-purchase series, especially paired with in-store data, is replenishment, beauty. You can see that category earlier is also spiking as well. This is a great place to use a mix of product retargeting. So what products have I engaged with? Curated recommendations. So thinking through top sellers in particular categories, new arrivals that might be of interest as they need to, replenish what they may have purchased in the past, as well as static content. But I know that can be a struggle right now. Think through as you're working through your creative teams, just for web, for email, for other channels, what are ways that you can repurpose a lot of those assets and create them all at once to be leveraged in different pieces of your marketing strategy, rather than having to go back consistently to that team, because I know they are stretched for time as well. Okay, next tip is to offer convenience with website personalization. So this is great for messaging about your company's response to COVID-19, how to make returns, when stores will reopen, and all of your updated policies there. I think we're seeing that across the board. But it's another great way to message, if there are interruptions in the delivery cycle, or if there are particular categories that might be shipping faster than others, but also being able to continue that email, the personalized email experience back on the web as well, and helping people pick off where they left off. Another great example here too, and we're seeing this across some of our customers, where there might still be a free shipping threshold, but that might have dropped, or it might have changed throughout this process. There's great ways that you can do what we call exit intercept modals during that purchase funnel to keep people engaged, to remind them of all of the other benefits you might be offering to them throughout this time period, to continue to increase conversion across the web. So just think through how those two channels might be able to work together with the data that you have at your fingertips. All right, product alerts and inventory issues in particular, but product alerts are very, very hot right now. I think this is one of the biggest focus of our customers right now, is how can they optimize in particular, or launch, if they haven't already, varying product alerts. So a lot of you are having inventory struggles of all kinds. It's very volatile right now, from excess to not enough, to certain delays in bringing products back in. So if you do have something like a solution like Smarter HQ, that can all be managed automatically for you in real-time updates that we're getting from the inventory feeds, and can ebb and flow with the inventory levels, and you can set different thresholds there. So think about if you did have thresholds already set for a certain percent of inventory left, you might want to actually adjust that depending on sell-through rates that you're seeing across your brand and purchases and what you have in stock, as well as potentially looking at those by category. We've seen some great success as well with these as a follow-on to an abandoned cart or abandoned checkout series to drive that urgency. And I think a lot of us as consumers understand that that is a problem out there right now. So if there is something I really do want, I know me personally, I'm much more motivated if I know that that's a hot item or that it's gone on sale to go snag it up before someone else does. One other tip too, in particular with product alerts, I would say, is to feature recommended products or maybe new arrivals, just in the case that the product isn't available when your customer does have a chance to come back to your site, just to help them find other ways to find something they might be interested in. Okay, I think we're ready for the next one. And on the product recs topic, use these to your advantage. This can be a great way to personalize your mass marketing spends, as well as offer more relevant content on your website if you have ways to do that on the web as well. Steer those online purchases towards the products, like I mentioned before, with higher inventory levels, maybe looking at products as you're looking to recover as much as you can in your seat, products that might have higher margin. Other ways that you can customize that to tailor for the health of your business, but then also for the benefit of the consumer as well. And then finally, before we get to our last piece around personalizing blast sends, keep an eye on customer wish lists. I know this is some new functionality that Smarter HQ has had to offer, so it's been interesting to see the behavior with wish listing activity. This can be a great driver for specific product alert campaigns as well, especially in the push notification channel. In real time, something on my wish list has dropped in price, for example, or is getting low on inventory or is back in stock. Can be a great way to engage people, but it's also a great piece of information to be able to leverage when we're to the point of reopening stores and thinking through how you might be able to leverage this data to communicate back to people when the economy is starting to pick up on some of their favorites, that it might be a great time to go and check out in store if they weren't quite sure about purchasing online. Okay, and then finally, personalizing blast sends with varying modules is something that's near and dear to my heart. We've seen lots of great success with this over the years and lots of creative usage for this. This can come in the form of personalizing with products that customers have engaged with loyalty information and the amount of points or rewards that I have, with specific promotions that are offered to different tiers of your customers, with product recommendations, with new arrivals. There are so many different ways that you can use this, and I think as you think about where your team might be stretched or limited, and if there was only really truly one thing that you could pick out of this to do that's new, this is where I would encourage you to focus and look, because there's lots of different ways depending on your ESP that you can set up very, very easy templates that can kind of plug and play and bring in different data sets depending on the type of campaign. So if you want to try varying recommendation models one day and then look at category affinity another day, or layer all of those on top of each other to minimize the amount of content that you need from your creative team or lifestyle imagery, for example, this can be a great way of doing this. And we actually have had a handful of clients that have adjusted to this approach just over the last couple of weeks, and we're seeing several with click-through rates on this content specifically in the 70% range, which is fantastic, unheard of. We'll see if that sustains throughout this this time period, but I think consumers are craving that personalized content, and they're reacting so far in a very, very positive way to at least keep that engagement going, to encourage that relationship to continue throughout this crisis. All right, so planning for post-crisis, what's next? I think we all wish we had a crystal ball to understand what might be next for all of us. I think what I would encourage you and leave you all with is to take some of these and think about just your specific situation and what's easiest for your team to adapt to and what's easiest to plug and play for your setup and your strategy for your brand and your customers. None of us really know what's next, so it's important to just be in a position to be able to pivot where we need to pivot. And I would encourage you, like we talked about earlier, remember this is a moment in time. There will be changes down the road for us, but when stores can open back up, we'll have all kinds of additional strategies that we can talk about helping that channel open up with a boom again as well, without e-commerce taking too hard of a hit too. So I echo what Kristen started us off with, that we hope you guys are all healthy and well, and appreciate you coming on here today. And please reach out, especially to your customer success director if you're a customer, or to Kristen if you have questions after this, and we can certainly continue the conversation.
All right, so that brings us to the bottom of the hour, which I know we promised to end this at 2:30 Eastern, but we will stay on for just a couple more minutes to address any questions that you might have. So go ahead and submit any questions that you have via the Q&A panel on GoToWebinar, and we'll answer a few of those. Let's see. Okay, so Kara, it looks like one person wants to know a little bit more about location data. How can you leverage location data during this time and take that into account with your marketing programs?
Yeah, location can be a tough one, but if you have that data at your fingertips, one thing I was thinking about that we've seen some customers do during the holiday time season, really mainly around shipping cutoffs for getting there before Christmas, for example, could be applied to the situation here. I know in talking with a lot of customers, they're struggling. Some are doing just fine and have their own distribution centers and are able to continue to ship out with minimal changes and minimal delays. Others are struggling with more delays, going through additional parties to get that product pushed out. So one thing to think about is if you're able to target from a geo-targeting perspective to know who might be in the vicinity or near a DC and be able to experience faster shipping times versus others that might be farther away, depending on your model, you could show specifically on the web additional messaging that they won't experience or would be less likely to experience a delay versus others who are farther away. So that could be something that could work to your advantage if you feel comfortable in that approach. I know some of it is very much up in the air right now. Okay. Andy wants to know what advice you would give on how to address segments of customers that may have been laid off or have been negatively impacted by the virus. How do you make sure not to over inundate people who may not be engaging right now? Yeah, I think a lot of that goes back to a lot of what we were talking about today in terms of keeping the campaigns that are reacting to the behavior consumers are having on your site, that they're showing you, they're engaging with a certain threshold or number of products, for example, and maybe laying a little bit more low on those that maybe aren't even opening emails, clicking through, let alone engaging on the site. Some other things that we've seen for our customers is in a lot of the more what we call up funnel campaigns, people who aren't getting down to the purchase funnel, you might want to set those thresholds maybe even a little bit higher in terms of the amount of engagement needed to be able to qualify for particular campaigns, depending on what your campaign mix looks like. So that might be something to consider as well. Okay.
It looks like there's only one more question so far, and it's from Wes. He's wanting to know, or he's commented that it's getting hard to move seasonal inventory right now. I know you've talked a lot about inventory. What strategy or campaigns would you say would help with moving that seasonal inventory?
Yeah, so what I like to see is a mop-up style campaign. It doesn't necessarily have to be always centered around a promotion, and we'll talk about this typically at end of season anyways, if there are particular products that need to be pushed before you put them on super clearance, for example. And a great way to do that without blasting out your entire list is to look at larger sets of data of who might have been engaging with that category of product, with that specific product, if that would apply here, and first target that group of people to push through that before you drop the price even further, and don't waste that on blasting your entire list.
Makes sense. Okay, and that's a wrap on our Q&A session and today's webinar. So as a reminder, we will send out the recording shortly. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining us today. We want to remind you to stay healthy, stay safe, and of course, have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.